Wanted Dead is not a bad game. Parts of it don't seem to work as intended, and some of the choices made here are definitely confusing, but to call the whole project bad outright, I don't know. Not only is that dismissive of the parts that do work, but it's also counterproductive. Not too long ago, I covered Forspoken on this channel, and it's partly because of the discourse around that game at the time that video ballooned up to being one of the longest on this channel. The game was being labeled as bad, cringe, and in one case, irredeemable trash in the comments of that video, and when coupled with the search terms that brought viewers to my video, I was shocked by how many people were just seemingly looking to confirm their biases. A lot of people just seemed happy to hate on the game without going into why they hated it, and I was just confused. I mean, why actively watch content if you just want to trash something? Yeah, I don't get it. So if you're here watching this video, hoping that I'm going to be trashing Wanted Dead like others on this platform seem to be doing, this isn't the right video or even channel for you. In a lot of ways, I hate terms like good or bad when describing media. Not as adjectives, that's fine. I mean when people use them as one-word answers that rob the audience of a deeper conversation where we can dissect a work and find the parts that worked and identify the places where things went wrong. And while I am also guilty of using simple language at times, I've made it this far and I haven't talked about the actual game of Security Breach at all in this video. And it's for a good reason. The gameplay is just shit. I only say stuff like that 24 minutes into a 33-minute video after discussing other topics that fed into the game and after giving credit to the better aspects of the title. So, no, Wanted Dead is not a bad game. Flawed, amateur, buggy, unfocused, those are better words to describe the worst parts of Wanted Dead. But conversely, there are a bunch of adjectives that could be used to describe the best moments of the game. Ambitious, interesting, novel, uncompromising, and, well, punk. More than anything, Wanted Dead is a confusing game. And really it all comes down to the choices that Soleil, the team behind Wanted Dead and Valkyrie Elysium, which also includes ex-members of Team Ninja, made in the making of this game. And just so we're on the same page about what I mean when I say some of these choices, I'm going to let this clip run uninterrupted in order to show rather than tell what I'm talking about.
Hey.
Hey, yourself. You want something? My treat.
How was your drink?
Tastes like regret. Stone, you sure don't want a slice of that bacon?
Spare me the sin of making you lose weight.
You think you can ask Madame Wong if she has a thing for me? Like, you know, girl talk?
I think that seat is taken.
We didn't come in here together.
Who? Mr. X? He's just a bodyguard, that's all.
Yeah, keep saying that.
He's her slave. First of all, he never speaks. It means that she doesn't let him speak.
Or he has nothing to say.
Yeah, right.
And?
Isn't it enough?
Jesus, would you please stop?
I'm genuinely interested in Herzog's theory.
I genuinely don't give a fuck.
He's just following her like a dog. He doesn't speak and he never makes eye contact.
In Herzog's world, women get pregnant by entering the men's room.
Biologically, it requires more than that.
For a minute I thought this day would play it out right.
All right, knock it off.
You seem to be very hostile today, Hannah.
Today?
Shut the hell up, all of you!
I think I'll have a shake.
What did I do to deserve you?
Hast du etwas Zeit für mich, dann singe ich ein Lied für dich von.
With that, you should have a general idea of whether or not this game is something you can fuck with. If this was too jank, sophomoric, confusing, or just way too surreal for you, then this game is unlikely to work for you. But if you're someone like me, you might dig this. This scene captures so much of what I'm talking about. Just in this one setting, so many strange choices were made. Doc asking about Madame Wong out of nowhere, Cortez reading The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner, which thematically has nothing to do with the plot of this game. All of Hannah's line delivery, really all of the line delivery in this game. And what's with the subtitling to lines that didn't make it into the final recording? Herzog immediately jumping into conversation even though he just came in through the front door, Hannah's sudden outburst despite being perfectly fine moments ago, and then randomly cutting out to a karaoke minigame. The pacing, the performances, the writing, and even tone, everything in this scene feels alien to the point where I'm not ruling this game out from having been written by ChatGPT. Sounds like it's covering something up to me.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
And every scene in this game is like this. Starting even with Hannah's walk animation at the start menu. I mean, what the fuck is this? Weird menu choices.
Lieutenant? I have some eggs, beans, bacon, make it 4 slices. No, 5. Definitely 5. A few pancakes on the side, some syrup, banana milkshake, coffee with cream. Please don't put milk in there. Very hard to digest. Some orange juice, and a pack of smokes.
An establishing shot on a car elevator that goes on for far too long. One of the weirdest jokes that I've ever heard.
So, check this out.
Yeah,
A guy wakes up. Massive hangover.
so?
Massive hangover. He's about to throw up and shit. He notices that he's naked, like no jeans, no undies. He reaches for his dick, and he finds that he has 4 balls.
Okay.
So, he immediately grabs his phone and dials his old man. Dad, I woke up the morning after, and suddenly I have 4 balls. His dad goes, "Get out of there, son, you're being fucked."
You're done?
I mean, seriously, this game just has Tommy Wiseau energy all over it, down to the strange line reading.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Characters will be in the same room with one another, interacting together, but it often feels like every character in this game is under their own delusion and having separate conversations that seem to be taking place in alternate dimensions all at once. But I could never look away. Virtually every scene in this game, every mini-game, every side diversion left me either scratching my head, staring at the screen in disbelief, or laughing out loud, unsure as to whether or not I was in on the joke while simultaneously wondering as to whether or not there was a joke being told at all. And that may sound like a bad thing, but this couldn't be further from the truth as to how this landed for me. This game has a specific audience out there that will eat all this shit up. People that love Deadly Premonition, No More Heroes, and even most of David Cage's games will be right at home here. And I'm certainly one of these people. I love janky games with batshit stories and design, with not only Drakengard 3 being my favorite game of all time, but with one of the best experiences I've ever had in all of gaming being the evening that my friend and I dedicated to playing The Quiet Man over SharePlay. It was, by all metrics, a bad game, but the fun was real, whether it was intended or not, and it was a great bonding experience and one of my longest friendships. I have an appreciation for things that are barely holding it together, and although there may be sequences in Wanted Dead that don't always hit the mark, you can never accuse it of not swinging for the fucking fences with every new revelation. So, what is Wanted Dead? The quickest explanation is that it is a PS2 or early PS3 era hack-and-slash action game set in Hong Kong during the year 2022. Yeah, that's right, 2022, which is another choice. Setting a game with a cyberpunk aesthetic in the immediate past? Okay, but right on. The game is divided up into 5 main missions that take place in a few visually interesting locales, such as an opulent office building, a park, a nightclub, and the streets of Kowloon. You fight your way through linear corridors, slashing and shooting your way towards objectives, culminating in a chapter's end boss fight. and then you spend experience points to unlock abilities. Between missions, you question reality with the help from these cutscenes, and then you spend time in a hub area of sorts in the form of the Hong Kong Police HQ. This is where all the world building, characterization, and side diversions take place. And really, that's what's here in terms of a basic breakdown. You go into missions and hack and slash, you go to HQ, watch a cutscene, and then rinse and repeat for the 10 or so hours it takes to complete the campaign, give or take a few extra hours if you are trying your hand at the mini games in any sort of real way, or if you're exploring the hub as much as possible. But I don't have a problem with a simple game, in theory. Though I do have a few issues with how this game structures its missions and action gameplay. First, these levels go on for a while. I was initially suspicious of this during my first playthrough, but I was dying a lot. So I chalked the length of these missions up to having to replay certain sections repeatedly, and yeah, this game can have quite the learning curve. It should be noted that there is an easy mode in this game that becomes available after dying one too many times, called Neko-chan difficulty, which continues the tradition of Ninja Gaiden's Ninja Dog mode and Metal Gear Solid 5's Chicken Hat, but as cute as the cat ears were, I decided to roll with the punches and learn the systems as intended. But I certainly wouldn't judge anyone who chose to play on that difficulty for either aesthetic or gameplay reasons. But yeah, this game can be unforgiving as hell. Enemies, especially ninjas, bosses, and enemy power weapons like grenade launchers or even shotguns can just kill you outright for making a single mistake. But now that I have played through the game more than once and I feel confident with its mechanics, no, it's not just the difficulty. It wasn't just me being bad at the game. These levels just keep going, especially the final mission. Jesus Christ. And although this is a straightforward PS2 era action game, checkpoints might as well be Dark Souls bonfires, as they are the only place where you can reliably restock medkits and grenades. And getting to one always seems to come with a moment of relief, as they are pretty sparse in each level, and they always seem to come immediately after particularly nasty sequences. I swear, there were more than a few times where I was low on resources, with some of the encounters in this game proving to be pretty damn difficult, only to find that the single thing separating me from the next glowing checkpoint was an off-screen enemy wielding a one-shot kill grenade launcher, or this bootleg version of Grey Fox himself. And I died repeatedly until I dialed in with what this game was trying to do. But you best believe me that the next time I encountered that off-brand Grey Fox, I went with the cheapest method of taking him out. I didn't put that sensor bar on the screen. This is what I mean about this game making the strangest choices. A game that is already extremely violent, featuring tons of dismemberment and decapitations, but the chainsaw is too much. I'm guessing maybe they just didn't want to render the entrails. But it's not really the game's challenge that I struggled with in the long run. Mistiming a parry, that's on me. But running around a corner and getting blasted because I couldn't see the red indicator letting me know that I could handgun counter a one-shot kill, that sucked. Sure, there is also a subtle sound effect that can clue you in on these situations, but the mixing in this game isn't always the best. But there is another thing that makes these encounters especially slippery, and that is enemy placement and movement. When you play something like a Souls game, dying is part of the experience, and every death teaches you something about the encounter. Where enemies are hidden and how they move, and ultimately what your best approach will end up being, all become apparent after a few mistakes. And this is mostly due to the fact that both the player and the enemies in those games move very deliberately, and attacks are usually telegraphed. But in this game, enemies really just react to where you are and run around with little logic. In a lot of the firefight sections of this game, I would move towards an enemy only for him to run past me and take cover while facing my character. So these enemies always felt a little less like a disciplined platoon and more like a group of caffeinated third graders playing laser tag. And while this is not necessarily a problem in the early game where pot shots only do a little bit of damage, having a squad spread out in nonsensical patterns with weapons that can instantly kill later in the game, this becomes annoying. And doubly so when you factor in the old school explosive barrels littering the late game arenas. So combat in this game can be a bit of a clusterfuck when you're figuring it out, and it still kinda is even when you have figured out the game to a certain extent. But when you learn how to play with the grain, the loop is actually pretty satisfying. Cautiously enter a room and post up behind some cover, look to see what types of enemies are running straight for you, take out a few of the enemies shooting at you until a melee character gets within range, The camera zooms in a little, and you become far less likely to get hit by any other characters as they pantomime a firefight with your AI companions in the background. Time your strikes looking for telegraphed hits to either parry with your sword, with the scariest enemies requiring multiple deflections, or keep your thumb hovering over the handgun counter button just in case the indicator for an unblockable attack fires off. And that is when this game is at its best. The combo strings available to you don't always hit the hardest, and in some ways, since this game has very limited strings, they vaguely reminded me of something like Lollipop Chainsaw. I mean, what the fuck? Everything is getting a remake now. If that's the case, I'll take a remake of everything Spark Unlimited did then.
Down on top of Council Headquarters!
But these limited strings are really for just applying pressure or getting in some free damage while enemies are in recovery, with the main mechanics in these fights revolving around scouting out attacks, learning to parry correctly, and time all of your reactions properly to build up your adrenaline gauge or stagger enemies to initiate finishers. Building up the adrenaline gauge allows for a randomized area of effect attack that staggers multiple enemies at once, and as long as a staggered enemy has low enough health, finishers can be executed. And these function similarly to how heat moves work in the Yakuza series. Can animations that do what they say on the tin and finish the enemies at the receiving end of these attacks in spectacular fashion. John Wick style leg takedowns into double tapped headshots, slamming a character into a wall before running your sword through them, or tossing a victim onto a live grenade before dashing away. Not only are these attacks fantastically animated, and not only are you able to chain finishers to multiple enemies who are vulnerable all at once, but they are contextually varied to the point where it usually takes a bit for you to see repeats. So much so that nobody has gotten the Platinum Trophy for Wanted Dead at the time of writing this, as one of the trophies requires that you execute every single one of these finishers. But this is likely due to a bug in all honesty, and this would be far from the only bug I encountered during my playthrough. But with all that said, it really can be a satisfying loop. A little shallow when compared to modern action games like Devil May Cry 5 in terms of depth, but right at home when compared to older games in the genre. And in some crucial ways, it reminded me of another cult classic that I truly love, and that is Bizarre Creations' James Bond 007 Bloodstone. As that game functioned very similarly to this one. In Bloodstone, melee takedowns gave you invincibility frames, which also charged a gauge called focus shots or focus kills, and those allowed for you to instantly one-shot kill any enemy in the rafters. So both of these games are games where you run into groups, charging up meters, so that you can take down massive amounts of people all at once. This is actually the second Surreal title, and who the fuck knows if I'm even saying that name right, that I've played in the last few months, with Valkyrie Elysium being the first time I've ever even heard of the developer. But when comparing both games in terms of just combat, it's really hard to pick out a definitive winner. Elysium had straightforward combos too, but there were different weapon types to spice things up. And by giving every enemy type an elemental weakness, it made resource management critical. Airborne combat was also a focus in Elysium, which made so much of its gameplay a constant dance of staying away from the ground while using the soul chain to zip from enemy to enemy. And then in between the Iron Harrier abilities and magic systems, there were always invulnerability frames to abuse when the dodge and slightly undercooked parry system weren't enough. In a lot of ways, Valkyrie Elysium became more of a game of constantly applying pressure and exploiting weaknesses than about taking defensive actions. But the larger half of what makes Wanted Dead's combat so interesting is firmly rooted in the defensive realm. So much of the fun in this game is centered around squaring up against one or two enemies, waiting for one of them to commit, knowing that you've already dialed in the timing to punish them effectively. It's not incredibly deep, but these are fighting game fundamentals, and when everything is working appropriately, and you are able to parry off one enemy, light up a group with the bullet time mechanic, and then just clear a room completely, similarly to a scene out of Kill Bill. In those moments, I found myself forgetting all about things like Elysium's air combat, or even the fact that Hannah cannot jump at all. And then when it comes to the bosses in Wanted Dead, outside of the generic spider tanks, really you dedicated 2 whole boss encounters to this one enemy type. But in all the other boss fights, everything that works about this game's defense-first combat really snaps into clear view. The games are just a little too different to really compare, but both of them fit their niche pretty well. However, with this game embracing a much larger challenge, the times where things didn't work properly knocked against my enjoyment harder than even the most repetitive levels in Elysium. Seriously, bad camera placement, off-screen enemies, or having to fight a ninja in a claustrophobic corridor in this game, some of these moments took the piss out of what were otherwise cool levels. But all of the praise that I just gave to the combat in Wanted Dead was almost exclusively centered around its melee systems. And that's simply because the shooting in this game is just kind of there. It's functional, sure, with headshots dropping enemies quickly, and the game does try to diversify your arsenal enough with not just the standard array of shotgun, SMG, and grenade launcher, but there is also a full weapon customization system built into this game for Hannah's main weapons. But with her handgun functioning more like the Hunter's pistol from Bloodborne, as it's more of a defensive tool and combo extender, this system's functionality really only matters to her rifle. And while making it easier to aim and adding extended magazines are a really nice touch, this game has a problem where every time you are shooting, it's really just because you are waiting to close in the distance so that you can have fun with the sword again. And the main reason for this is that laser tag feeling to the combat that I mentioned earlier. If you take cover and start shooting as soon as you enter a room, it kind of just feels like bad whack-a-mole with enemies spastically snapping to and from cover. But running into the room, it just feels like poking the beehive. So the combat in this game is in a really interesting place where its highs are really high and its lows make you want to play a different game altogether. And quick aside, does anyone else hate unlocking skills in action games at this point? I understand it when we're talking about a game like Devil May Cry and there are so many moves to learn, but even there, having cornerstones to the combat like enemy step locked behind red orbs, I don't know, I hate it. So many games do this, but then this type of action game always features New Game Plus. To me, it feels like something just to slap on the back of the box. Extended parry windows, better combat strings, better squad-mate abilities in Wanted Dead. I feel like if I started this game with a complete kit, I mean, I still would have died quite a bit, but I probably would have gotten a hang of things much faster. What is this habit of locking things that actively make the game easier, more accessible, and more enjoyable behind skill points? Maybe it's supposed to show that our character is becoming stronger, or whatever bullshit. But I may keep RPG systems in RPGs and make execution the differentiator in action games kind of guy. Sorry, end of rant. But luckily for Wanted Dead, when you are not fighting, everything just goes off. The cutscenes with the weird writing, Hannah being a considerably tall woman that can barely fit through certain doors, off-brand soda machines, Fountain Dew, hell yeah. Stumbling on your way to an elevator, landing you into a completely different art style, eating ramen just to be interrupted by the loudest Australian Food Network reject.
Tonkotsu? That's a good one. First, you observe the bowl. Appreciate it.
According to the record of the Yokohama Ramen Museum, ramen originated in China and made its way to Japan in 1859.
This narrator only exists for this one scene. Seriously. It's stuff like this that makes me certain that this game is self-aware. Same with the full-on karaoke minigame that exists for just one scene and only includes one song. I would ask why, but I don't know. I just kind of dig how surreal this game can be at moments. In fact, I pretty much dug everything that was going on in this game outside of the missions. The police station was super fun to hang out in, one-off jokes or quips from voice actors that seemed just as confused as the main cast, a gross-out cafeteria scene, and a very friendly, albeit anxious gunsmith that seemed far more interested in guns than people and far more interested in cats than guns. And by the way, she is both voiced and modeled after Stephanie Justin, who not only contributed to this game's soundtrack, but also did a late-night cooking show to promote this game. But if you find yourself recognizing this actress, it's because she lent her voice and likeness to Metal Gear Solid 5's Quiet. And yeah, for the same person, these are certainly two different takes on the woman. This building, as the hub, for whatever reason, really just hit home for me. Not only was it fun to walk around and talk to weirdos, or find Hannah's paperwork just completely strewn around different sections, but it felt authentic. Without getting into why, I've seen the inside of a few government buildings and police stations in my day. And these linoleum floors masquerading as marble, and lifeless hallways, and waiting rooms humming with fluorescent bulbs, damn man, they nailed it. Equal parts armory and paper-pushing bureaucracy, yup. This is a police station, alright. And yeah, I really haven't talked about the story much here at all, have I? Well, let's just keep it brief, as the actual plot isn't nearly as interesting when compared to how it's told. You play as Hannah Stone, leader of the Zombie Squad, a team of criminals who work for the Hong Kong police force. as a unit that works at the behest of corporate interests. In this story for dour synthetics. The game then kind of goes off into conspiracy mode pretty quick, and we find that some of the synthetics androids are rebelling. And Hannah and company are tasked with quelling that, finding out who's behind the rebellion, fighting rival companies, and sort of uncovering Hannah's past. There is a lot going on, and the storytelling is a bit disjointed and out of sequence, but it certainly gives the player more than enough excuse to
pull some trigger in the name of democracy or something.
There are spider tanks, synthetic humans, 80s music retooled for this cyberpunk's interpretation of last year's events in Hong Kong, corporate conspiracies, bosses with cybernetically enhanced abilities, and more than just a few ties to Kojima's previous works. This is a story that is equal parts iRobot, the Will Smith version, not the Isaac Asimov classic, and Metal Gear, Revengeance, not the Koji Pro ones. But this is more of the what is Metal Gear like for people that have never really played Metal Gear interpretation. But it doesn't really matter. And that is because this is more of a game of small moments than overarching plots. Similarly to how Pulp Fiction was more of a movie about talking about cheeseburgers and old David Carradine shows than a movie about criminals.
Royale with you. That's right.
And that's where I found almost all the enjoyment, even if it was in a Neil Breen kind of way. But the subtext here, I find it equally as interesting as all of the characterization and constant cutscenes. First, slight spoiler, through some anime flashback scenes, we are shown that Hannah signed away her autonomy for a loan to cover medical fees. And what a nightmare this is. First, this is a setting where there are synthetic humans capable of replacing the labor force altogether, but tuberculosis has made a comeback, and medicine is so expensive that a young mother is given the choice between selling a chunk of her life where she has to work for corporate interests just to get the medicine for a largely curable disease. And then she works alongside the police under the zombie unit, which features a skull insignia as its marker, and while it's not a one-to-one match, I did find myself drawing parallels to how the worst fucking cops in America have been rocking the Punisher logo in recent years. This zombie unit that shoots first and asks questions later, maims potential witnesses, and is considered a burden on the force for how much collateral damage they cause, this shit really bummed me out. Not because it wasn't fun to play as Hannah Stone and the rest of her gonzo team, but because of how bleakly believable this setup seemed. Cops already protect and serve corporate interests and their own jobs far more than the communities who fund them at this time in America. And before you get all, not all cops with me, if you've ever gone to a picket line or protest, which side of the line were the cops usually standing? And with medicine already being prohibitively expensive in America, treatable diseases like diabetes requiring people to often figure out whether or not they are going to afford to pay bills or stay alive, corporations continuing to automate with none of the increased profits going back to the people who actively run their establishments and instead looking for new and more effective ways to exploit labor, I could 100% see a fucked up version of the future that looks far more like Wanted Dead than Star Trek. It's pretty surreal that a game that features giant Maine Coon cats, ramen trivia, cops with full sleeves, sign language, William Faulkner for no real reason, and 99 Luft balloons could fill me with such dread in these moments. But at the very least, if this game is a harbinger of things to come and the future looks like the world that is depicted here, it will be a confusing, sometimes fun, sometimes incredibly frustrating mindfuck of a time. And the music, while recycled, will at least be better than some of the other Bleak takes on our future. I really liked Wanted Dead. Maybe for all the wrong reasons. Maybe I laughed at parts that weren't meant to be funny. I liked the action when it clicked. I loved the characters and the insane choices that they made throughout. It has all the markings of a bad game, but I never felt that way. Parts were bad, but other parts were glorious and even thought-provoking. It is a mess of a title, and really this game is going to be enjoyed by a very specific audience. But if you're in it, welcome to the club. We love trash-flavored trash here from time to time as long as it's trying something new and wild. But if you're on the fence, wait for it to go on sale or show up on Game Pass or something. And if you left this video thinking that the game looked like irredeemable trash, you already know where you stand, and I hope you have a beautiful day. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for watching. You may have noticed that even when games are rough around the edges like this one, I tend to point a spotlight at the bits I liked more than the bad ones. And that is simply because I am only covering things on this channel that I have a real interest in. Wanted Dead was one of those games, and conversely when I talk about the rough edges, I am in no way saying that those are dings against the parts that I thought worked. This game is what it is. It's weird, a little busted, cool, fun and something that I ultimately enjoyed. It will be interesting to see where this game ends up on the side project that I have on this channel called Ranking Every Video Game Ever Made, where after every 5 essays I do on this channel, I add the games to an ever-growing list in hopes of figuring out what the best game of all time actually is. So if that kind of thing interests you, check it out, and if you like what you see on this channel, consider subscribing, dropping a like, or maybe comment down below some examples of games that you came away feeling positive about when the general consensus was more negative. Either way, thank you for watching, you're all beautiful people, and I hope to see you in the next video.